And now here is part 2 of the Tony DeRosa interview.
Howard Ashman just pitched the whole story, walked us through the story, and you could just say, it's like, wow, this is, you already know, this is
going to be good.
Real. The music is amazing. It's just going to be a great film, great project to be on. So, yeah, I went on that, and I got a small lead on that. I did Carlotta, who was the maid character who goes and yells at Louis. Louis was the Matt O'Callahan guy.
Right.
And Carlotta is the maid who's like, oh, I'll be right back. She's trying to be very delicate as the kitchen's getting destroyed. And
it was a funny sequence.
Yeah, so I did a little bit on her. Then I did a little bit of Scuttle, a little bit of animation with that with Dave Steffen, who led that character, and a little bit of Ursula with Ruben Aquino, and just
so you jumped
a little
around.
bit here and there on that film, just helping out. Yeah. So that was a good learning film, because having kind of a lead, a very small lead, was different. It's like you're responsible for this thing. So taking it from just conceptual drawings to making it an animatable character and bringing it to life. So, I'm not 100% happy with everything I did, but I think that's typical. You kind of learn as you go along.
Yeah.
So from there, let's see. Then we went to Rescuers Down Under.
And you're supervisor on that.
Yeah, I supervised on that, mainly Bernard. So I did a lot of work on that for that character. And that was good. I worked with...
that's the thing that's interesting there is, you're animating... I think Frank did a lot of Bernard in the original.
Yeah.
So did you guys go back and look at what...
Of course, yeah.
Mr. Thomas did?
Looked at all that, model sheets, just... trying to really understand what he had done and be inspired. And now I saw that as a great learning opportunity. Again, another thing to learn is like, your job is to research Frank Thomas's animation on anything. How much can you learn from that? And just really, you're paid to just look at his drawings and his acting and the way he's approaching things. And
what was your takeaway from that, or do you remember looking at Frank's stuff?
Well, to put it in one thing, his draftsmanship and his acting, of course. I think Frank's always known for his great acting. I always think of the scene of Bernard. He was like, wow, well, no, I wouldn't put it down there. He does the roll of the hand, that kind of thing, little things like that, which is very Bob Newhart. It's almost like a Bob Newhart caricature, but it stands out. It's just a very believable scene. And I remember just looking at a lot of those drawings from that scene too. Just really well drawn, great attitude. Just interesting because the mouse designs, they have these big eyes. They didn't have whites for the eyes, but he got so much out of it.
Yeah.
So, hopefully we did justice to it.
I think you did. I think you did.
I tried.
That's one they always skip over.
Yeah. I didn't do the box office.
Box office wise, because they go, it's Little Mermaid, and then they did Beauty and the Beast.
Exactly. And I tried to do some pretty comprehensive model sheets where really break down the character, and got to work with Mike Gabriel directing and Hendel Butoy, and there I think of that film, and Hendel was really keen on this. Was if you ever saw Hendel Butoy's thumbnails when he would do a scene, he basically would animate the whole scene. His thumbnails were so clean and precise, he would plan it out almost to the breath of each character, the dialogue. I don't go that far in thumbnailing, but his stuff always looked great. So I always thought, wow, what is he doing that I could steal?
Did that make you more comprehensive in thumbnailing?
Yeah, on that film I probably thumbnailed more like a Hendel, boom, everything I could think of, thumbnailing it out, very detailed, and try to adopt more of that style of planning, which I think helped my work a lot, helped me really know, again, it comes back to, know what you're going to do before you start animating it, really plan it out. So I think that was really where the light kind of went on in the value of that. And even reading notes, I think these are from Art Babbitt lectures of he said, Frank and Ollie and Milt especially would say, look, you got to know what you're doing. You've got to plan it out somehow. You've got a thumbnail. It's got to be clear in your head what you're doing before you put pencil to paper in your scene. Thumbnail, plan, figure out, look at reference.
So you know where the character's going and the acting and all that.
Yeah, it's something about having an idea of what you want to say and saying it. and, and put a period at the end and move on. It's like,
Do you ever get a section of dialogue where you go, I have no idea how I'm going to play this? I mean, obviously the tracks give you something, but do you ever go through it and then say, nah, I got to redo this because
animate or thumbnail it?
Either thumbnailing it or even after you reach the animation stage, that it all becomes clear to you, after the fact or in the middle of it, or do you usually at the point where you thumbnail it, you've figured out what approach you want to take and what you want to do? I guess that's the question. Do you ever change your idea about it in mid-stride?
Well, yes, in some ways. I always feel like some of the things that will happen more is if I'm thumbnailing, then when I was working on paper, I would take my thumbnails, actually enlarge them on the Xerox, blow them up to the size that I'm going to animate, because I always felt that those little thumbnails, because there's so much thought and energy you're putting into these little drawings, that you're thinking about how they relate to each other, but they're not on pegs, so you don't worry about volume so much and little things like the structure. So it's all about emotion and attitude and acting.
Right.
I always felt that those have so much more energy than if I try to copy that large. I need to blow that up big so that's my base. That's my, I really like what's going on here emotionally or expression, something. So I always felt that was the best way for me to translate that small drawing to a bigger drawing. So then I would draw over that, but always have that underneath until I felt like I had a drawing a relatively good.
But you're pretty well clear on what you want to do by the time.
Very clear. Try to be pretty clear. See, most of the time it's very clear to me. What will happen more is after then I get that first pass of drawing over my thumbnails, and I might go through and start saying, okay, well that key is not necessary, because what I can do is work between this one and that one, and it's the in between that I can get a semblance of this key. It doesn't need to be a separate pose. It can be a transition, or maybe it can really be part of this pose, just favoring that but not going. So anyway, things like that will happen. But that's sort of the evolution of the shot as you work on it. You may edit things. Then, of course, once you show it to a director or somebody, they may say, what is that? That doesn't make any sense. Or why is he doing this? That expression should be this expression. And sometimes you agree with that, note, and sometimes you don't. You can make your case. It's like, this is really this better. And then ultimately it comes down to the director will have the final say. I mean, ultimately they're in that position for a reason, and you're in your position for a reason. So it's like you need to, ultimately, if they are strong on seeing it one way, you need to do it that way. So that's part of the being professional, about the work. So, and there's been times where I've done, changed scenes, and I felt like they weren't as good. But, that's... But
you're doing what the director wants you to do.
Your job is. That's your job. Your job is to make the director happy, ultimately.
Yeah. No, that's...
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
That's...
I mean, it is a job you put a lot of passion and energy, creative energy in, but ultimately you've got to make the top people happy with what you're doing. So that's what your goal is.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my process is.
Yeah, I really wanted to get into that because usually I thought I've got one of the top animators here. I should dwell into it because when Andreas was here, I sort of brushed over things lightly.
Yeah.
And I thought, nah, I got to get more.
Yeah, everyone has a slightly different approach, but for me that worked well. I think that the blowing up the thumbnails I kind of got from Glenn Keane because he would do that. He would do. His thumbnails were a bit rougher, which I think I sort of adopted after working with Glenn on Beast and Aladdin. He tends to thumbnail looser, rougher, so a little bit more geared towards the emotion, getting the emotion, the acting into the work, and much more visceral. Which I think I tend to think a little bit more that way in my work. So I started
to get it organic.
Yeah, and he would take his original thumbnails and blow them up, and so I thought, well, that's good because I always felt like copying what you got in the thumbnail and just copying by looking at it and trying to draw it big was. I always felt there was something that sparked. I don't know what it is. That little spark in that thumbnail, that little life that was in there.
Because you're working faster.
And it's small, and you're not. It's like everything's focused on this tiny little space, and it's like when you're big, it's sometimes
You're thinking of other things.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's anyway. I always felt that was helpful.
You're more
really helpful.
tuned into the volumes, and you're more.
Yeah, I think when you start drawing big, you start thinking of more of the construction, the volumes, the model. Where you need to think of model when you're doing a thumbnail, but not at the expense of emotion. To me, the emotion is always the primary thing you're going for in planning it. The acting, the emotion.
So you slid over from when you finished with Rescuers Down Under. You slide over to Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, Beauty and the Beast.
Which is another landmark.
Yeah, I got onto that. That was a little frustrating at the beginning because I didn't really have a lead on that. I felt like I wanted to do. I'd led on Rescuers. I felt like I'd done pretty good work on it, and I wanted something else, something to chew on. It just kind of threw me into the pool of animators.
Now, why was that? Because everybody else had already grabbed the characters?
I don't know. Maybe my attitude. I don't know. I think I may have been a little difficult to work with. I said,
what?
Working with learning. That was one of the films. Learning to work with the directors more. Like the rebel side was coming out too much.
Criticism.
My rebel side was coming out too much on that film here and there. That was probably not that was it, but it may have been part of it. And so and then he gave me a lead on the wardrobe character, which was a small character, but I had already done kind of a smaller character, and then I worked on Bernard, which was more fun to do something with a little more meat to it. So then I was just kind of frustrated. I was working on some of the opening bell song. I did some crowd scenes on that, some of the background characters. And I just remember one day thinking, I got to go talk to Don Hahn and just tell him, I could do more than what I'm doing. I want to help out. I want to do something. And I thought, okay. So I thought in my office, like, okay, if I could do anything on this movie, what would it be? And they're like, well, it's the Beast. I want to work on the Beast. I mean, that's like the best character in this movie. So I just went into Don, said, well, there's an opening. I really love to work on the Beast. If there's a possibility of that. And Don said, well, okay, well, I'll find out. So then, it was pretty quick. Don came back, okay, you're going to be working with Glenn on the Beast. I'm like, great. And I was really happy. Because,
wow.
I got to work with Glenn, of course, always admired.
Now, was that the first time you worked with him extensively?
Yeah, as I said, I've done some in-betweening for him on Christmas Carol.
Right.
But not animation.
On Willie the Giant.
Yeah, Willie the Giant. So, Beast, yeah, I got to work real close with Glenn on that, which was great. I learned tons of stuff. Just saw how he worked, how much energy and passion, thought he puts into his stuff. And
what was the working routine and relationship on that film? Because you're working on the Beast, and obviously Glenn's the lead, so
right.
He's sort of supervising other animators on it. And
well, at first I know at the beginning I would show him thumbnails. I would just thumbnail stuff out, and that's where he started. My thumbnails were much tighter at the beginning because I was still in the Hindle Butoy phase of thumbnailing out in detail, but he was more like, no, just do big, thing. I think of the main beats, just kind of think of how emotionally. Because Glenn, I think his stuff is all emotion based. I think that's very visceral. Even his drawings are that way, very
sure.
Just like he feels like a line and pushes. You feel the energy, you feel the forces happening. So that's kind of more the direction he pushed pretty much everyone that works with him. But I felt that, and I felt more in a way more natural for me to work that way because I feel more that way. I'm not quite. Always thought I wasn't quite the draftsmanship to be able to do that. I think over the years I've gotten to be a better draftsman to be able to do that. Because to work in a visceral way, it's almost like you have to be a total master of drawing, so you have control over what you're drawing. Because if you're just doing pure emotion, it's very easy to get stuff that doesn't make sense. Doesn't read, doesn't clear.
You gotta have a little control.
Well, you get stuff that maybe isn't as clear as you want. So, and that comes, by doing it. You just do a lot of bad drawings and eventually get it there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so worked with him. As I said, I know early on I would show him thumbnails and then rough passes. First rough pass, I sort of learned on that film. Just keep showing. Don't get bogged down in making it perfect before you show it. It's like just do a rough pass and get it in front of Glenn or whoever needs to see.
Now, how did you divvy up who's doing what scenes from what sequences? Obviously, Beast is not.
Yeah, well, it was mainly Glenn. I think Glenn was always very conscientious of an animator point of view of giving people chunks, like a sequence or a good run. Good run of scenes, like 4 or 5 scenes in sequence, so you could feel like you had a moment in the movie instead of just a scene there.
And
then I've got a scene of Beast going, huh, over here, and then a scene of Beast going, ah, over there, you know. So it's like you don't feel like there's a continuity to your work. So he somehow figured out a way of divvying up the work that way, you know. So, yeah, so that was good. I think that's a good way.
And you got a lot of that climactic stuff.
I got some of the stuff, the battle at the end. I got little bits of the library, Beast giving Belle the library. Some stuff where he goes back to his lair. He's looking at the mirror. You know, how can anyone learn to love a beast? You know, this big pullback where he's like all sad.
Yeah.
He's got Belle locked in her room there. Anyway, and there's stuff throughout.
Now the picture's out again, making money. So
yeah, that's good. You know, I think that's one of the best ones I've worked on. I think that's story-wise. I think it's one of the best. That's a great film.
Had a great story crew on.
Very entertaining. Great songs. Great subject matter. You know, characters are fun.
Yeah,
cool to look at. The objects are neat and different. You know, for when they were done, and the Beast is a different hero. You know, very different type of hero.
Yeah.
You know, so. It was fun.
It was a good. So okay, so you wrap on that.
Wrap on that. Off to Aladdin.
Another good one.
Aladdin, yeah. I got to work with Glenn again on Aladdin, and I remember being in a room with me, Dave Steffen, Tony Fuccelli, and Russ Edmonds. I think we were all working on Aladdin. You know, working on that character at that time. So it was kind of fun. a bunch of us working together.
I've talked to Gombert extensively about, you know, and I remember at the time that they had to redo the entire middle of the film in like 3 or 4 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And Jeffrey came through and wasn't happy. And
yeah.
They redid stuff. And as you said earlier, they took the mother out.
Yeah.
It was the mother of Aladdin, and she's gone. And
yeah, Aladdin, I think the main thing was the big changes they made at that phase was it was a good film, and they had the mother in there, but the feeling was, okay, we've got a good film up to when the genie gets in the movie, it like goes into fifth gear and it just takes off.
Right.
We got to get to the genie faster. So they started peeling away all the extraneous stuff that slowed down getting to the genie.
Yeah, that's what Ed Gombert said. He said, Katzenberg came in and said, you've got to get the genie.
Yeah. And that was the whole reason for that, because you want the genie in there as soon as you can, which makes sense. He's right.
You get rid of some of the clock winding and the mother.
Yeah,
and
all the backstory stuff that's not really necessary, you know. So that worked out. But Aladdin was good. We worked with live action a little bit more, being Aladdin's a human type character. But
how much roto was? I mean,
roto. We didn't really roto. I mean, pretty much everything was shot with live action reference. We had stats, but we were
because it didn't look like it was
encouraged to push things further.
It just looked like you used it.
Some of it was thumbnail reference for like the one jump sequence with Aladdin. Just thumbnailing stuff, looking at the live action, which was good because he had really great leans and tilts and action lines. One story I have from Aladdin is I remember working, I think it was a weekend at home, and had my desk set up and the TV's on in the corner. I think my daughter was sick with something. She was like sleeping under it. She made a tent and she was sleeping under the
She would have been in
table.
Elementary school.
Yeah, she was little. I don't know. I couldn't be more like 4, 3, 5. I don't know. Something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, she was out there sleeping because she wasn't feeling well. And I remember on the TV was they were having the gymnastics tryouts, or the women's gymnastics for the USA gymnastics team, and that was a song in the background. I was working on that one jump sequence with Aladdin's trying to do all these like slick moves to get away from the guards, and I'm doing these drawings saying, oh yeah, I'm really pushing this. He does like a split here, and I'm really pushing this stuff. And then I turn and I look at the TV at these gymnasts. I'm like, wow, I'm not even doing what they're doing. That's like real life. They're doing way more extreme stuff than what I'm. So I start going over it again and really pushing it even further. So it's amazing how
the gymnasts on the TV.
Yeah, it's like amazing how sometimes when you think you're pushing stuff, you're really exaggerating it, and then you need that little reference material can really show you that. No, you're not really doing
you're
anything
too conservative.
here. Yeah, you're being way too conservative with it. So, in that case, it was the right way to go with it, because, I mean, the idea was to push the animation more in that cartoony Warner Brothers
Yeah,
type
yeah,
of
yeah.
thing. So that was kind of interesting story on that one. So then Aladdin. Then we go into Lion King. And Aladdin was great film. And then Lion King.
And you do a lead on Nala.
Adult Nala. That was a great one. Of course, Lion King at first was the B movie. Pocahontas was the A movie, according to people. But again, I kind of saw it as, hey, they're giving me a lead. I didn't have any preference really necessarily to go on to Pocahontas or Lion King. I was just happy to be on the next film. They're giving me a lead, even better, Cool. And as we started seeing sequences, for me, the moment I felt Lion King was going to be a really good film was we saw, Circle of Life. We saw that sequence.
Yeah.
That was like one of the first ones into production, which was really great. Really great film. Then, and these, to me, I always call these like the three pillars of the movie, and this is what makes, well, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons that movie is great are these three pillars. You've got Circle of Life, then you've got the Stampede, Wildebeest Stampede, which was very innovative and groundbreaking for its time, and great, just an emotional, an eye candy, is great. And then you've got Mufasa's Ghost, which was very different for an animated film at the time as well. And I always felt that those were kind of like those three big emotional moments.
Mufasa, being killed and lying there dead on screen.
Right.
They killed the mother and Bambi, but you never see it. It's all off screen.
Right. Yeah, but to me, those are three big emotional moments that really get you in that film.
Yeah.
And I still think that's like the bedrock of that film.
Yeah.
And I was mentioning that
it's a whole pivot
to someone, I think with Roger Allers, I forget where we were, and Roger said, yeah, if you think about it, that's the birth, Circle of Life is birth, the Stampede's death, and Mufasa's Ghost is rebirth. So it's like those three moments. It's birth, death, and rebirth. And so in a way, that's the circle of life. There you go. So that's it. So yeah, it was a good film. Learned a lot about lions, quadrupeds.
So now you had animated quadrupeds on Oliver.
But this was different. We had, of course, bringing the lions in to the studio was a very important moment, I think, for all the animators. Very informative, seeing those gigantic beasts close up.
Yeah,
it's a different experience when you are that close to them, and they. Yeah, I went up stupidly and I say, okay, who wants to pet the lion? I remember Andreas, I think, said he went up and pet the big lion, Joseph, the big male lion they had. And I remember saying stupidly, yeah, I'll go pet the lion. And you're walking up there, and as you get closer and closer, you're thinking, this is not a good idea. And then you're standing next to this giant lion. You realize his head is like that big. You don't realize how big
the head is. But he decided
are.
not to take your arm off.
Yeah, well, he's got him on a chain. And the guy said, well, before you pet him, make sure you press down hard. Don't just give him a light touch, because he'll think it's something back there. Like turn fast. So you're like petting him, like pet the lion. And then you're walking away. But you definitely get a little bit of a rush of adrenaline standing next to that.
And you were okay. I've done this now.
But in a way, I am really glad I did that, because that to me informed the animation. When I was animating, I remembered that moment of. This is not just a kitty. This is
a
powerful,
large animal,
powerful beast.
So actually touching.
Yeah, just standing next to him and touching him. Yeah, as I say, so much of it is that visceral quality that you can get into your animation is important. It's something. It informs your work, I think. It's a head knowledge. You need the head knowledge, I think, but ultimately, what audiences respond to is the emotion, that visceral stuff.
Yeah.
That you can't maybe put a name on. You can't analyze it.
Sure.
That to me is what the artist brings to this stuff. It's that ethereal stuff that's just there, and that's why I say you get the thumbnail. It's in there somewhere. You want to you want that thing, whatever that is, and it's hard to pin it down to exactly what that is.
But that helps knowing it.
It's there. You have to know it's there somewhere, and it's always hard to retain that and get that into your work. And so that's to me always the battle of animating stuff is bringing that life into it, the illusion of life. Of course, Frank and Ollie's book, that's kind of what that's talking about. It's life. It's bringing life into those characters.
Taking flat drawing.
Yeah, it's taking any drawing and bringing and making it alive.
Yeah.
So
That's what was pounded into me early on.
yeah, so
these are drawings, so you've got to bring them to life.
yeah, so Lion King, wound up being amazing. Did it well, really well, and better than anyone expected, I think. So
Nobody had any idea.
no, and I remember opening weekend. They were opening also the same weekend the parade at Disneyland, the Lion King parade, and it was like 100 and something degrees. They limoed us all down to Disneyland, and here's these poor people in the parade in costumes jumping around, and I heard a bunch of them passed out. They're all like in costume and doing the whole performance, and it's like all these celebrities, like Whoopi Goldberg was there, met George Lucas there, and John Goodman, like all these people were like down there for this big parade in the opening. I remember Roy Disney getting up because they showed the film after the parade. They ushered us all into one of the theaters down there, and Roy Disney saying, the numbers are in. It looks like we're going to have a $40 million weekend, which at that point was
huge,
unheard of.
It's like $120 million now.
Yeah. So I was like, everyone was really happy, and we all watched the movie. And I remember that was the first movie. My little daughter, she was the first movie. I saw her crying at the end when Simba's going up Pride Rock. She started crying. At Simba. She's I'm so happy. So I was like, it's like wow, this is like.
She would have been what, 6, 7?
Yeah, 6, 7, something like that. So I was like, wow, these films really speak to little kids, but it speaks to more than just little kids, So it's neat to be part of something that touches people in that way.
Yeah.
So it's cool. You count it as total blessing to be able to do it.
So you were, boom, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, and then after Lion King.
Then Pocahontas, I went on Pocahontas.
So you worked on every single one that was going through at that time.
Yeah, I got on Pocahontas. I think a lot of people went on was it Hunchback? I think a lot of people jumped on Hunchback, but I went on Pocahontas. They gave me a lead of Nakoma. I was Pocahontas' friend. I did a little bit of work with Pocahontas. With Glenn, just a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was great. Got to work with live action. We worked with live action. I did a lot more closer work with live action on that film than any film before or since, which in a way was neat because some people complain, it's too close to the live action. But to me, I thought it was kind of cool because you could see a lot of things really studying the live action subtleties and mouth and fleshiness and really studying how the face works. To me, I just noticed little things and drawing over faces like, oh, wow, look at all this little subtle overlap on the dialogue and how the cheeks are moving and the lips. And so that was kind of cool in a way. I always kind of look at each one as learning something new and different. You can always keep adding to your knowledge and another tool you can use in your work, So, that was a good film. I just kind of said this film is going to focus on working, doing a great job as I can on my character, and that was a pretty easy one to get through.
Yeah, Pocahontas was another biggie.
It did pretty well.
Wasn't as big as Lion King. What is?
Yeah.
And then, so after Pocahontas,
I think I got on to Hercules after that. Ron and John were starting on that. I got on fairly early on that. Worked with Gerald Scarfe, who was doing the design work. He's a really nice guy. He does all this really kind of edgy, kind of aggressive artwork, and you think, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be like a punk rocker. But he's like this really like low-key English.
Was very designing, I thought.
Yeah. I think I maybe hurt it in the long run, but that's,
No, I think I think maybe it hurt it commercially, but I think it made for a more interesting.
Yeah, well, it was neat working with Gerald Scarfe. It's just a different approach to design, and definitely looked different than if he wasn't part of it. And even the design I worked on, Zeus and Hera were the characters I supervised, and he definitely influenced the design of those characters. So it was good. Worked on that. I had a really good experience working with Ron and John. A little bit of a bigger lead than I had working with them before, so that was good. I think they were happy with my work on the movie, and I think on that film, I really just made a commitment to be more business-like, not to take the emotion out of it, but realizing, okay, this is really a job. I guess, in a way, it's almost like I was just having fun up to a certain point, like not that I didn't take it seriously, but I don't know if it's just maturing, but you get to a point where it's like, okay, now this is really a job. Something about it, like a job, I need to approach it as like a job and be even more serious than I've been in the past, but still bringing that energy, but taking it seriously as something that, I don't know, I don't even know if I'm being clear. But
I think you are.
A subtle difference.
You're you're well, as you mature as a human being,
Yeah.
you're saying, this is a job of work as well as, it's not just a class project.
Yeah, and again, not that I didn't feel that in the past, but I think in the past it was more expressing, this is about more, maybe it's about me, about what I want to do. And on that one I started feeling like, no, this is bigger than me. It's more about this whole thing, this project, this film we're creating, and how my piece fits in. Maybe that's what I'm thinking. It's like how what I'm doing fits into this big.
So you were less of the renegade on this picture. You were more collegial.
I think maybe that's part of it. Yeah, still speaking up for things I thought were good, or better, or could have been better.
Yeah.
But drawing that line, not crossing a certain line on that, not being too aggressive with that. So it's the learning curve in a way, not only artistically but emotionally, I guess.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And then after Hercules,
then I got kind of a neat opportunity. I don't know what I was really slated for.
Did you go on to Atlantis after that?
No, Fantasia 2000. I got a call from Kathleen Gavin, who was one of the top production people working with Peter Schneider. I think she may have been one of the producers on Fantasia 2000. She was working with Paul and Gaetan Brizzi on the Firebird sequence.
Oh, yeah,
on that. And I guess they were looking for a lead on the Sprite character, for that sequence that finished up Fantasia 2000. And for some reason, the Britzis gave me a call and said, well, we wonder if you wanted to do this, do this character. And, I met with them and they showed me the sequence and everything. And I was not quite sure because initially they're board. They're amazing artists, first of all. Sure, most people have seen their boards. They did a bunch of boarding for Hunchback and of course they storyboarded the Firebird sequence, but just beautiful pastels and very, very amazing artwork. But the piece, the Sprite character wasn't as much a character, almost more like the whole piece is more poetic, so it's more of almost like a symbol than a character per se. And so I guess I was a little reluctant to just do a character that I didn't feel like I had put some personality into. I guess that's what I was feeling. I wanted, what's the personality that I can really dig into here? So, I was kind of hemming and hawing. I wasn't really getting back to them. Finally, Kathleen talked to me. So you met with them, and, what'd you think? I said, well, look, be honest with you. I don't know what I can really bring to this as from an animator. It seems like it's just more of a poetic thing. It's sort of kind of just moving her around, and I don't know what I can bring to it as far as character or emotion. She says, well, that's what your job. That's what you need to bring. You need to bring the character.
Right.
It's not in there. That's why you got to come onto this and do this. So once she said that, I'm like, oh, okay, that's it. I'll put it, because I almost felt like they would be resistant to that, but it wound up that they weren't. They didn't really say that to me, but when Kathleen said it to me, I kind of got it. That's like, okay. So and I saw little moments here where I could bring a little bit of more of a personality to her, and still have the poetic movement and grace and all the overlap and stuff we tried to build in there, kind of this mysterious creature, but build her as kind of a sympathetic character, even though it's a 9-minute piece. But she was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. We did a lot of line mileage on every frame. We did rendering on the drawings and stuff, so which effects we'd use later on. They would add shadow and tones as well, but they would reference what we had initially done. Some of those cleanup drawings I heard were taking a day for one drawing. It's like insane, so much line work. But I think it paid off. I think it winds up being a really different looking piece, and kind of unique, and very honored to have been asked to work on that. We had a great crew. I had it was me and Jin Kim, who's still at Disney. Sandro Cluzo did some really great animation. Tim Allen, Dave Zabosky. They're really good
quite a few guys.
Crew of guys on it, and they did a really good job on the Sprite, and so that wound up being a cool thing. It was short. Then went on to Atlantis with Kirk and Gary. Got on early on that, and they gave me a choice pretty much of any character. So I picked the Moliere character, the little dirt digger guy, just because he looked fun and different. I guess I had done a lot of lead characters, not either supervising or working in a unit
Now, when you're supervising,
Uh-huh.
especially you're the lead supervisor on this project or that, do you have more? You can't devote as much time to animation yourself, or are you expected to turn out as much animation as you would if you're, a character animator in the trenches?
Yeah, I think you are, because I think as a lead you're expected to be more proficient, in what you do, and more economical in use of your time. Maybe not struggling with certain things that maybe a unit animator may have to take a little bit longer time on. So that's, I think they kind of expect you to at least do what the
As
other
much
people do.
animation as you would ordinarily.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's part of being a supervisor, is you're expecting a higher standard, a little higher standard, it's expected, which is fine. I mean, it should be.
Sure.
Should be.
Sure. I just wondered, because a lot of times you're going to be looking at other people's work and critiquing it.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, you have to be efficient with that. You can't kick it around, or kick it around the bush. You have to be very direct and say, okay, this and this, and you can do little sketches and say, you can't go over every drawing someone does. You got to be like shorthand. Okay, you can do this, or maybe hold that pose, or maybe take that out, or slow that down, speed that, whatever it is, And work with the directors on it too. You got to bring them in it. You don't want to wait too long before bringing them in. You got to kind of collaborate. That's such a key thing in this medium, is the collaboration. Because when you look at these movies, it's not one person. There's no way. It's like,
it's a whole.
A person directing has impact on it. But if you change the crew, it's going to be a different movie. It's totally collaborative.
Yeah.
So it's you need to all realize that.
From Atlantis.
Yeah. So Moliere worked on that. Had fun. Kirk and Gary again worked with them. It was good. It was a good film. Yeah, it didn't do that well. Maybe could have been better. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you're not in charge of the story. You're in charge of the story.
I had fun with my character. I did the best I could with him.
I always liked the animation on that show. I thought.
Box office wise,
everybody is clicking.
Yeah. I think there was constraints. I think there was one version I remember seeing early on of a screening and thought it was starting to come together, but then it was the thing, we got to make a movie that's only so long, so you get all the cuts, cut, and things start getting too short, and you don't really let things breathe, and the pacing's not right. If it's a live action movie, that probably would have been a 2-hour movie, which maybe would have made it better, because you let things kind of breathe and live a little bit longer than when you're cutting things so quick like that. It tends to not let the audience connect with much. It's like you're moving on to things so fast that you're not relishing a good moment, maybe, something that can really resonate with people. So
okay, so now we're done with Atlantis, and you.
Then I think you're kind of getting
Home on the Range.
Getting kind of near.
You're getting near where the studio sort of imploded.
Times are getting tough. Treasure Planet.
Treasure Planet.
Glenn was calling for me on Silver, on Long John Silver, and Jim Hawkins with John Ripa was leading that character. So I was like, I wasn't the happiest camper to back to unit animator, and
so it was Jim Hawkins and
Silver,
Long John.
Yeah, I did some work on that, and it was tough because it's. A lot of bad stuff going on at the studio, lots of people leaving, people have been there a long time.
Fear, what's going to be happening.
Writing is kind of on the wall, We're not doing 2D, no one was coming out and saying it, but you could kind of see where things were headed. And of course, that was my career, I was devoting my whole career to this, learning this and doing this and loving what I was doing.
And now it's shrinking right underneath.
Yeah, now it's kind of imploding. I always thought the studio was not exploding; it was imploding.
Yeah, it was
collapsing upon itself. And every day would be another bad thing. You'd come in and like, oh my gosh, something like Eric Goldberg is gone, and all what? And who's leaving? And they fired. Who?
Oh my God!
I mean, it's like, you're just like every day was like that. It was just like another.
People would report back to me on
every day was
the meetings with Tom Schumacher and.
Every day it was just one. You thought, how much worse is it going to get? And sure enough, coming in the next morning, it was worse. And so anyway, eventually I got Treasure Planet. I admit, the attitude was It was tough. It was hard to really get into your work. That's not very professional, but it was a tough one.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
a tough one to get through because it was hard to be really enthusiastic about the work and get into it. I think it did okay work on it, but it's it was a tough one.
Yeah.
Then,
And then
got asked to go on finish up Home on the Range. Did that. They were pretty much done. I was just.
So you just came in on the end of Home on the Range.
Yeah, I don't even know how long I was on it, for a few months. I don't know, 3-6 months, something like that. I don't know.
And then
Then they were like, okay, we got you some training, Maya training, if you want to do it. But that almost felt like, okay, here's some training. It's almost like go
You're
figure it
done.
out. Go figure it out. I'm like, oh no, I done the only, as I said, the only computer animation I done was Oil Spot and Lipstick. That was 1987. This is now 2002. That's a long time ago.
That's 15 years later.
Yeah, that's a long time ago, and it's changed a lot. So I don't know. I didn't really remember much of what the process was. So, and back then we were just kind of making it up. I don't even know if there was a process back in 1987. You just kind of did it.
You were pioneering it.
Yeah, in a way, I guess. But so they had us do some classes, and I did a few tests. That whatever, they were what they were. Nothing spectacular. And they said, okay, you can submit these tests and see if the leadership, the CG leadership, guys I'd never met, I didn't know
relationship
who they are.
with.
Yeah, I don't know who they are. They don't know me. Just send them just send them here. Look at this. I send them an email, and then I never hear anything back.
Right.
So until I get the call, okay, come into the office. We have to talk to you.
Uh-oh.
And then it's
Yeah, so always
That's
somebody
it.
knock on the door and
That's
say,
it.
got a minute?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. Okay. Well, we're not going to need. You're done your assignment, the way they put it. Finished your assignment. So.
Yeah,
So that was not a happy
20-year assignment now.
That was not a
Thank
happy
you.
day. But my wife and daughter and I, we all went out to dinner, kind of celebrating. We figured, hey, I had a good run, And as I told you over lunch, I guess there was the you're done meeting, and then there was a few weeks before I actually left. And in the meantime, I think they were even selling. That's when they were selling the animation desk. So that was like another stake in the heart. They were doing all that stuff, selling the furniture. So one of the things I did want to get were some storyboards for my home studio. So I went to one of those warehouses in Burbank where they were selling the stuff really cheap, like $10. You got a storyboard, some
Wow.
ridiculous price.
So there was a small silver lining.
Yes, I went there, but the good
Wow.
thing was there were guys there that had already left, and then some of them were over at Warner's working with Eric Goldberg on the Looney Tunes Back in Action. So I was telling them what was going on with me, and they said, "Well, do you have anywhere to go?" I said, "No." Like, "Well, Eric's looking for animators. Mind if we tell Eric?" I said, "No, please tell him." So then, within that week, Eric called me and said, "Yeah, come on."
So you segued right over to.
Yeah, Eric was like,
action.
come whenever you're done there, just start Monday. So thankfully, I finished Friday, like January 3rd or something, and then January, whatever it was, 6th.
6th, you're over on
first
the
day at
Warner's
Warner's
lot.
on Looney Tunes Back in Action. So I hit the ground running with that. So yeah, that was good.
And you were describing at lunch how sort of freeing and different it was to work on Warner Brothers characters.
Yeah, it was. It was
compared
very
to
different.
Disney characters.
Well, yeah, and I don't necessarily say it's the difference between Disney and Warner Brothers. I think the big difference for me was Bugs and Daffy. Those characters specifically are so well designed for speed and animation, just being able to draw them quickly and efficiently. If you look at the designs, there's very little detail. All the details right in the face, which is where you need it. The bodies are real simple. Daffy's all pretty much one color. His legs are orange. His body's all black. Bugs has a color sep, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And he's got gloves. But so I found that at first I'm thinking, well, I've never really drawn these characters. It's going to take me a while. But I think within the first few days, I felt really comfortable.
Fell right into it.
Yeah, and you watch these shorts as a kid all day, and they used to run those Looney Tunes
When
shorts.
you went over to start the assignment, did they lock you in a room with some Warner Brothers shorts?
No.
Or did
No, Eric was very cool about it. Just like, here's your office. I don't even remember what I started. Of course, we looked at the shorts. You had reference and stuff, but I don't remember the first stuff I worked on. I just remember maybe getting some model sheets that Eric had done. Eric had done some really good model sheets, kind of combining a Bob Clampett and Chuck Jones kind of mashup of those two, the best of both, into this kind of neat design he
Of
put
course,
together.
the one difference I would think would be you'd be animating on ones rather than twos or threes, like in some of the shorts, because you're
Not
doing the
always,
live
not always,
action.
not always. Yeah, but some shots. Yeah, I think there's mainly shots where there's real contact with the backgrounds. I'm trying to remember how we did it. I don't even remember. But they had the good thing, which was they could lock, even if it was a moving camera, they could lock it so it didn't move on pegs. So your stat would be stationary. So it's like the frame would be moving around, like the background would be still, but the frame would move around it. if that
Oh,
makes
okay.
sense. So you could animate the characters stationary. Then they would retrofit your character to the move, or the camera move.
Yeah.
So that was good, because then you didn't have to animate the actual camera move. You could animate in one spot, then move it later. They would move it later.
Remember the animation on that film being really entertaining.
Yeah, it was good. Again, it's not a great movie. It was really good for me to kind of decompress after Disney. It wound up being all the disappointment and bitterness or whatever it was from Disney.
The sorrow.
Just let me draw these guys, have fun animating. I didn't do any overtime on that film. I was just like, I'm just going to work my full 8 hours, put it in, go home, kick back,
Enjoying the
family, exactly, and just kind of catch my breath here and figure it out from that point. And at that point also, I'd started working on some of my own. I think I was telling you over lunch, this little book idea I have that I've been developing year over year. I mean, it's been many years in the making, but it's kind of just my project that keeps my own sanity for my own creative output, just something that's mine, my thing, my little corner that I'm developing. So that's been kind of a good thing too. I think it's good to have that creative outlet that, you own it, you like it, you keep it that way. You don't like it, you change it. Rather than, as I said, in the studios, your ultimate goal is to make the directors or whoever you're working with happy.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
very different, very different. So,
Yeah.
So anyway, I continue to work on that, and that keeps the sanity, keeps the creative sanity. So yeah, Looney Tunes. Then I was slated to go. I had gotten a call from Curious George to go over there at Universal's right after. Like I had it lined up. I was like finishing Looney Tunes like beginning of September. Then a couple weeks later, I had like a week off. Then I'd be right on the Curious George. Well, I was like getting in my last week of Looney Tunes, and I get a call from the Curious George people. Well, we got some changes, and it looks like we won't be starting till March now. I'm like, what? I'm like.
I'm
You
all geared
guys,
up.
I'm like, and then all of a sudden my rebel came back. You guys said,
That's right.
look, I haven't been looking for work. What are you doing to me? I'm like, this is ridiculous. Oh, well, you're not the only one. I said, oh, well, that makes me feel a lot better. You're doing this to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's
I was
really
like,
nice.
I was
Thank
like really
you
mad at
very
them.
much.
I was really mad at them. So I went to Eric and said, look, Eric. He said, oh, yeah, you're finishing soon, right? I'm like, no. If there's any way you can keep me on there just a little bit longer, to help out with any of the ancillary stuff coming up. So he put me on this thing where they were doing bugs for interviews. They did this thing where they could have a guy doing a talking. They would have the interviewer would ask Bugs
Right.
Bunny a question,
It was
and the
a
guy
sort of
would answer it
generic
live, and he
interview.
would actually the lip sync would actually fit, some computer program that would actually match the lip sync to whoever the guy off stage is on microphone. So I worked with Eric on that for a while. I don't know, I got like a week or so out of that to help out. So anyway, then I was high and dry,
At loose ends.
high and dry for a little bit. But I had a bunch of little things come up, and there was like 5 years where I was not at Disney. At first, it started with the Looney Tunes thing. Then I think I did go to Disney Tunes. I did a little bit of the Three Musketeers. And most of the stuff was like finishing up little things. Three Musketeers. Then I did a stint on Bambi 2, doing some character model sheets and designs.
But you didn't go overseas to animate.
No, I think initially they wanted me to help with some animation, but then Andreas became available. It's like, see you later. It's like, Andreas is here. Bye.
Yeah, I know. He
Yeah, I know.
described that whole
Yeah,
thing.
that's okay.
Doing that.
Andreas gets to do that. That's fine. And so then I left Bambi 2. I don't know. I was kind of at a low point at then. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is.
Where am I going?
Yeah, I know. It's like Bambi 2, and Bambi. And we'll get to this later. But Bambi to me was like one of my all-time favorites. So working on Bambi 2, I just felt it was kind of sacrilegious in a way. But I don't know. I probably shouldn't feel that way. But I always felt like that's such a masterpiece. It's just a masterpiece of not just animation but filmmaking. I just think it's such a great film. It's because of what's the script? 4 pages. I mean, it's totally visual. It's engaging. It's magical. It's animation at the highest level. The draftsmanship, the acting.
Oh yeah.
What those characters are just so. I don't think there's a bad drawing in that film. It's like amazing.
It's iconic.
Yeah, the backgrounds, everything in
Iris
it.
Wong.
The lighting in that film is beautiful. It's just even the little stylized sequences they get in there. It's
great. Amazing.
So anyway, to me that was kind of hard to work on a direct-to-video version of Bambi. I don't know, it was just something.
But it was a paid. On the other hand, it was a
paid
paycheck.
me. Actually, I wound up enjoying it to a certain degree because I did a lot of drawings of the Great Prince because they didn't have model sheets of these characters. They had a lot of individual scenes, and it winds up in Bambi. There's a lot of inconsistency in the characters. Like the Great Prince, especially, is very inconsistent. He's not in the film that much, but and the way it's lit, you don't notice things. He's a lot of backlit or dimly lit, so you don't really see him in great detail most of the shots. So I did a lot of research, kind of getting it all together and bringing the Great Prince and doing head turns and turns on the body with the antlers and everything. So it wound up being kind of a neat design and drawing exercise, trying to turn all that stuff, and did some model sheets for other characters as well, some more incidental characters. So that was good. And I did an anatomy study, a skeletal study of Bambi, like what the skeleton's doing under there.
Sort of back to your skeleton.
Yeah, it was cool. It was cool. Yeah, drawing the
skeleton
skeleton and just to help animators know what was going on underneath a little bit. So that was good.
And then after that, there was a whole series of films you worked on.
Yeah,
The Simpsons.
Well, I worked on Fat Albert. Then actually, right after Bambi, I got let go on that for a few weeks, and then Bert Klein gave me a call. I was like, "Hey, I hear you're looking for work. I'm working on Fat. I just started on Fat Albert. Come and help." I'm like, "Yeah, great." So I went over there, and I didn't really know Bert that well, but I got to know him pretty well in that film, and he's good friend even to today. And James Lopez, worked with him.
Yeah.
There were 2 other guys, both ex-Disney guys. We were all like kind of glommed together. We had a great time. We were kind of limited by the budget and
at
time.
some point, Curious George becomes ready for you to go on.
Yeah, that was right after Fat Albert. Finally, Curious George's like, okay, we're gonna get started. Want you to start this time. And then they were like, what were they saying? I think it was like in July. We want you to start beginning of July. And I was like in kind of the throes of Fat Albert, helping these guys finish it off. And I think Fat Albert was budgeted or scheduled to go into August. So I talked to Bert, and he was the director on the animation part. And I said, well, I'll call them. I'll see if they can stay on till the end of Fat Albert. Then I'll go on to Curious George. So I called over there, and they said, well, we will give you the opportunity up till like July 26th or whatever. If you don't take it by then, we'll give it to someone else.
Oh.
So I told Bert, well, I got to leave, because Fat Albert was going to end. Curious George is going to probably go for at least another year or so over. So I wound up leaving. And so my first day, this is typical. Okay, so I leave Fat Albert. I get on Curious George, and at the time there was one director working it. And my first day, they were screening the new version. I guess they had William Goldman.
William Goldman.
Yeah, the screenwriter.
He had done the script. They were told, faithfully, religiously follow the script and board this. As they do, it is
terrible,
unwatchable. It's like, what in the world is this? That was my first day. The next day, that director is fired.
Yeah, and then Matt came in.
Well, Matt, they didn't have a director. I mean, Matt's a couple of weeks off. So here where you have to come now, or we'll give the job to someone else. They didn't start production on that at least for another, I don't know, it seemed like 4 or 5 months.
Did you stay on?
Yeah, they kept me on, which was great. I did tests. They were going to do a David Chappelle character, was going to be this little rabbit. So I did this little rabbit test with Dave Chappelle from the Chappelle Show.
Yeah.
It's a cute little bunny. It's fun. It is kind of funny. It's this little cute bunny, but he's Dave Chappelle, so he's got a real attitude. So the fun thing was on Fat Albert, working with Bert and Jamie kind of really brought the joy of working on the stuff again. There was something fun about just collaborating, working with those guys. I realized, kind of made me rediscover that joy that had been kind of sucked out of my heart. It's just kind of, and I realized, you can't let these people do that to you, because that's what gets you into this. That's why we do this, is you got to bring your joy to the work, and it's gonna be tough. There's always gonna be a reason to be bitter or be upset, but why did we get in? Why did we do this? And if you don't bring that joy, it's not going to be in the work. It's not going to be there. It's going to be dead. And so when I was doing that rabbit test, I was totally loving it. I had time. They weren't bugging me. They were working on getting a story, and they kept me on. They were paying me, so I was just like trying to make a great test, and I got it done. I'd just done a rough test. It really wasn't a design. Then I gave it to Shane Prigmore and Shannon Tyndall, who were the designers, and they did a few drawings over some of my roughs, and I went back and tied it all down and made it kind of a consistent model. And then I showed it to Matt and Bonnie Radford, the producer, yeah. And Matt was like laughing hysterically because he loved it, and Bonnie loved it. And at that point, there was some shake-up with the animators, and opportunity came to lead on George, and Matt asked me to do a test on George, so I did, and he liked what I'd done, so I wound up leading on George on that
the
film.
lead character.
Which was fun. I mean, we had constraints. It didn't have the time and the budget that it should have. I really felt that could have been another not Bambi, but Dumbo, because you had the mute lead character, this kind of innocent character in this world that doesn't understand curious little monkeys, and I think some of the things that had to be taken out because of budget and time constraints would have made it a better film. And it turned out they made money on it, and they were relatively happy. But I think it could have been a really great film. But, it is what it is.
Right.
And it turned out okay, I think.
Right.
All things considered.
Considering that it was just, they were fumbling around on it, because I was walking through there all the time.
Well, they were fumbling around, it was 14 years or so. They were working on various scripts and versions.
Yeah, at some point you got to
But I think Matt did a great job. Matt came in, and he had the mandate, you can only change like so much, and
picked up the pieces and ran.
He changed a couple little sequences, and he would show execs, and they go, great. And then he gradually wound up changing pretty much the whole film, but he did it piece by piece, kind of like the frog in the boiling water. If you turn it up a little bit at a time, the frog doesn't jump out of the pan, and that's what he did. He just kind of changed it little by little. He didn't come in and say, okay, we're going to rewrite the whole thing, because they would have
freaked out.
There's no way we're doing that. So he was very smart. He was a smart guy, doing it the right way, being very methodical, and working with them. I mean, he worked with executives as well. But
and I think they were happy with him, and they were happy with the film.
Definitely. Yeah, I think so.
And then before you went back to Disney, there was The Simpsons.
I also did some freelance, a little bit at the Duck Studio, a little bit of 321 Penguins. I did some storyboarding freelance. And I think through Bert, because Bert Klein had worked on The Simpsons years ago, and he was working over here on was the one on Hollywood Way.
The Hollywood Way studio was Stars Media.
Yeah, Stars Media. He was already over there, and I guess over at Rough Draft, he had worked with Bert, who was over at Rough Draft. They were looking for someone to board and.
So did you work at both those studios?
No, I was at Rough Draft in Glendale, and on the Fat Albert, working with Bert and Jamie, I boarded some of the animation because we were getting boards for animation, but I was the live action guy boarding it. So I went in and just did really rough boards on some sequences, just really rough, like on Post-its, kind of give us like a framework. So Bert really liked what I had done. So he told Rich Moore, Tony can do boards, and he's a really good animator. So I wound up going over there and giving my portfolio, showing them my work, and they hired me. Yeah, so that was great. I loved working over there. It was really good. I know at Stars sometimes people say, it's the pressure. We're really coming down on us. But Rough Draft was really different because we weren't in the midst of the hornet's nest over there. We were kind of separate. Rich and Lauren, who were the two directors over at Rough Draft, who are now both at Disney. Both of them are both at Disney, and really great to work with. Really talented, smart people, and enjoy working with them.
So you're one of the chosen few hand-drawn animators who have survived the Holocaust of hand-drawn animation and really gone on for years and years after the implosion at Disney.
Yeah, it's been great. I've actually looking back at getting out of Disney and working in other studios has really been good in a way because it really opens your perspective. To see that there's other places where there's some really cool people doing really great stuff. Because at Disney, I think you get very insular at times. It's like, this is the place. Nothing else is happening outside of here.
Right.
And it's like,
And that
no,
simply isn't the way it is.
No, there's and certainly there's a lot of people now at Disney who I worked with outside,
Yeah.
and it's cool to see that. It's people I liked and I enjoyed working with, who I thought were really good.
And now you've been back at Disney for what, 4 years, 5 years?
Yep, going on 4 years. Came back, Princess and the Frog. Got the call from Ron and John, Peter Del Vecchio, coming lead on Lawrence, little guy, Princess and the Frog. That was a great film to work on. Everyone was like so keyed in on, all right, here's our chance.
Here we are, back again.
Do our best. It was like the all-star team as much as we could, get people.
Yeah.
And it was just okay. Let's do this. Let's try to bring 2D back. And I think we did a good job. Could the film have been better? Yeah. I mean, I think it could be.
It
a
could always be
film.
better, but I thought it was a solid film, and it did solidly.
It's okay. It's good. I'm proud of the work I did on it. I think I did the best I could. And I think a lot of people felt that way. I think everyone really chipped in. It didn't do as well as the studio would have liked. They did make money on it. I think they were hoping it would have done better. I think that was the kind of the downside of it. Is that I could have done better. Expecting it to do better. So then let's see. From there, I did a little bit of CG training. Winnie the Pooh, went on to that. Worked with Mark Henn on Pooh primarily. And that was great. I love those characters.
And now today, you are...
Today, after a short stint of helping out on the Henry Selick project last year, now back, Disney, did a little CG training, helped out on Paperman short, which will be coming out shortly. Will be out this year at some point, either at festivals or attached to some feature.
Yeah.
But worked on that for a couple months, and now I'm more back into CG training, helping doing some toolkit work for Wreck-It Ralph, which are like little bumpers for TV, between TV commercials. So sort of like extended training, continuing training, but using stuff that's hopefully usable at some point. Doing stuff
way into the light of day.
Yeah, hopefully doing stuff that they can use to promote the movie.
And to wrap up, your 5 favorite pieces of animation, either that you worked on, that are features, shorts, stuff that you loved as a kid, as an adult, and if you can't think of 5, give me 3.
Sure. Well, I think I've mentioned a few. Of course, early on, the Peanuts, especially the Charlie Brown Christmas thing, I just love that. To me, it's all about characters and staging, but there's obviously a simplicity to it, but there's a real charm and I guess character is the key word. It's such a character-driven piece, and I really gravitate to stuff that's character. Something really, I don't know, that just rings my bell. I love that stuff. So that, Bambi, of course, as I mentioned, to me that's, I know not everyone loves it, but I just find that's such a high point in the medium. It's just such a meeting of so many elements that came together.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people love Pinocchio, and I like Pinocchio a lot, but Bambi, I guess because of the simplicity of it. I guess I also gravitate to real simple, kind of poetic things in a way. I don't know. There's something about boiling things down to the minimum amount of elements that you need, and just playing with that. I enjoy that. And if you can do that make a really strong statement very simply, there's something. I think you can do that in animation like no other medium. So let's see. I like, what is it? Totoro, the Miyazaki. I think that's one of my favorites. That one I love too, because it's the childlike worldview. I think Miyazaki does better than anybody. He really shows a child's world, unlike anyone else that I've seen in live action or animation.
Yeah.
Especially for animation. I think most animated films, you may say it's a child's point of view, but to me, most of it isn't very convincing. It's more like a grown-up's view of what a child wants. But Miyazaki, I think, really gets into what a real kid thinks like. Somehow he taps into that really well. So let's see, what else?
Give me one more.
I'm trying to think. There's so many I can think of.
The stuff that you worked on.
stuff I've worked on, I'm really proud. I really like the Fantasia 2000 piece, the Firebird Suite. Of course, there's always a scene or two you think about. I wish if I could get that one back. But I think overall that came out pretty well. Actually, on that piece, I have to say I was really touched for the memorial for Roy Disney. I don't know if you went to that. They had a El Cap. What's the last thing they showed at his memorial was that piece, that Firebird Suite, which I was like, I just was just honored to be a part of something that I know Roy thought that much of, that he would kind of put that as the stamp at the end of his, whatever they want to call it, life celebration, his celebration of his life, or memorial, whatever you want to call it. But I was just, when that came out, I was like, wow, I was just honored to be part of that. That was really cool. So I have to say, for that and other reasons, it's really, I was happy to be part of that one.
Okay. Well, I think we will wrap on that.
All right, thank you.